A man rescues a crying leopard from a trap, but what the leopard does next will leave you stunned. At first, it seems like an act of pure compassion. A broken animal, bleeding and desperate, saved from certain death. But that single moment sets off a chain of events no one could have imagined. Because this leopard isn't just fighting for survival. It's carrying the evidence of something far more dangerous. Soon, the man finds himself hunted, torn between saving his own life and uncovering the truth behind the trap. What hidden? Truth was meant to stay buried? And when survival comes down to trust, who will betray who first? Before we dive in, drop your name or city in the comments. It reminds me that behind every view is a real heartbeat. The morning dawned crisp and quiet over the Montana wilderness, the kind of stillness that had drawn Eli Whitaker to this solitary life in the first place. Thin wisps of fog clung to the pine trees as he stepped onto his cabin's weathered porch, coffee mug warming his calloused hands. The autumn air held that familiar bite that meant winter wasn't far off. Eli took a long sip, savoring the warmth, and reviewed his mental checklist for the day. The Southwest hiking trail needed clearing after last week's windstorm, and he had to check the erosion barriers along Miller Creek. Simple, predictable work, just the way he liked it. At 45 years old, Eli had spent the last decade as a forestry worker, maintaining trails and monitoring the health of these woods. The job suited him. Out here, he didn't have to make small talk or navigate office politics. The trees didn't expect anything from him except competence and respect. He set his empty mug on the porch railing and grabbed his work pack from inside. The familiar weight settled onto his shoulders as he adjusted the straps over his worn flannel shirt. Tools clinked softly against each other. Pruning saw, shovel, first aid kit. He'd learned long ago to be prepared for anything these mountains might throw at him. The hike to the Southwest Trail took about an hour at his steady pace. Eli moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who knew these paths by heart. His boots barely disturbed the carpet of pine needles beneath them. Around him, the forest was waking up. Chickadees calling from the branches. A squirrel chattering its morning complaints. The windstorm damage was obvious when he reached the trail. Several branches blocked the path, with one medium-sized pine tree down across it completely. Eli shed his pack and got to work, falling into the comfortable rhythm of physical labor. The morning passed quickly as he cleared debris and sawed through the fallen tree in sections. It was nearly noon when he heard a sound that didn't belong in these woods. A cry of pain, raw and desperate, echoing through the trees. Eli froze, saw halfway through a branch. That wasn't any animal he knew should be out here. It came again, sending a chill down his spine despite the warm exertion of his work. Every instinct told him to leave it alone. Whatever was making that sound, it wasn't his problem. He had a job to do, a routine to maintain. But something in that cry, the pure anguish of it, wouldn't let him walk away. Eli set down his saw and moved cautiously in the direction of the sound. As he got closer, the cries grew more distinct, punctuated by low growls that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He pushed through a dense patch of undergrowth and stopped dead in his tracks, heart hammering against his ribs. There, in a small clearing, was a leopard, a creature that had no business being in the Montana wilderness. Its spotted coat gleamed dully in the filtered sunlight, rippling as powerful muscles tensed and strained. One of its back legs was caught in a steel trap, cruel metal teeth biting deep into flesh. Blood matted the fur around the wound. Jesus, Eli breathed, taking an involuntary step backward. The leopard's head snapped toward him, golden eyes locking onto his face. Its lips pulled back from impressive fangs as it snarled a warning. Eli's mind raced. A leopard. Here. The implications were disturbing. Someone had brought this animal here illegally, probably for one of those can hunting operations he'd heard whispered about. Rich men paying to shoot exotic animals in controlled conditions, calling it sport. The thought made his stomach turn. The leopard tried to lunge at him, but the trap held fast. Another cry of pain tore from its throat as the movement wrenched at its trapped leg. Despite its predicament, there was no submission in those golden eyes. Only defiance and fury. Eli knew he should radio this in. Let the proper authorities deal with it. That would be the smart thing, the safe thing. But who knew how long that would take? The animal was suffering now, and something in him couldn't walk away from that suffering. "Okay," he said softly, more to himself than the leopard. "Okay." He set his pack down slowly and opened it, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The first aid kit wouldn't be much help for an injury this severe, but he pulled it out anyway. Then he took out his work gloves and pulled them on. The leopard watched his every move, muscles coiled tight as a spring. Its growls had subsided to a low rumble, but Eli had no illusions about the danger. One wrong move, and those teeth and claws could tear him apart. "I'm going to help you," he said in the same quiet voice he'd use with an injured deer or elk. "But you've got to work with me here." He began edging closer, moving at an angle rather than straight on. The leopard's growls intensified. Each step felt like walking through molasses, his body screaming at him to turn and run. But he kept going, kept his movement slow and steady. When he was about 6 feet from the trap, he crouched down to examine it. It was a heavy-duty steel leg-hold trap, the kind that had been banned in most places for its cruelty. The spring mechanism would take considerable strength to compress. One person could do it, but it wouldn't be easy. "This is going to hurt," he warned the leopard. "I'm sorry about that, but it's the only way." The next few moments would require perfect timing. He'd have to compress the springs enough to release the jaws while staying out of range of the leopard's claws and teeth. One slip and he'd end up as badly wounded as the animal he was trying to help. Eli took a deep breath and moved into position. The leopard's growls rose to a snarl, but it held its ground, watching him with those intelligent eyes. He grasped the springs on either side of the trap and began to squeeze. The mechanism resisted, metal creaking under the pressure. Sweat beaded on Eli's forehead as he strained against the springs. His arms trembled with the effort. Just a little more. The trap's jaws suddenly sprang open. The leopard yanked its leg free with a roar that seemed to shake the very air. Eli threw himself backward, but he wasn't quite fast enough. As the animal twisted away, one of its massive paws caught his shoulder, claws raking through his shirt and into flesh. The pain was immediate and intense. Eli scrambled back further, pressing his hand against the wound. His shirt was already soaking through with blood, but his attention was fixed on the leopard. It had pulled itself a few yards away and now stood facing him, its injured leg held carefully off the ground. Blood dripped steadily from the deep gashes left by the trap. The two of them stared at each other, both breathing hard, neither moving. In that moment, something passed between them, a recognition, an understanding. The leopard's eyes held no gratitude. It was too wild, too proud for that. But there was something else there, a gleam of intelligence that seemed to acknowledge what had happened between them. Then, the moment broke. The leopard turned and limped into the trees, its movements still powerful despite the injury. Within seconds, it had vanished into the forest as if it had never been there at all. Eli sat back heavily, his shoulder throbbing. The encounter felt almost dreamlike now, but the pain and the blood on his shirt were very real. He opened his first aid kit with shaking hands and began cleaning the claw marks as best he could as he worked. His mind turned over the implications of what had just happened. That trap hadn't appeared by accident. Someone was operating illegally in his forest, treating magnificent creatures like that leopard as nothing more than toys for wealthy hunters. The thought made anger rise in his chest, hot and unfamiliar. I had chosen this job partly to avoid exactly this kind of situation: conflict, complications, moral choices. His life was simple and orderly, just the way he wanted it. But that leopard's eyes haunted him, full of wild dignity, even in pain. He couldn't just go back to his routine, knowing what was happening in these woods. Once his shoulder was bandaged, Eli gathered his equipment and stood carefully. His whole body ached from the strain of fighting the trap's mechanism. He should report this, he knew. But something held him back. Official channels moved slowly, and whoever had set that trap would have plenty of time to cover their tracks. No, he needed to understand more about what was happening here first. The trap's location, the type of device used, these were clues. Someone local had to be involved. In a small community like theirs, secrets were hard to keep completely hidden. As Eli hiked back toward his cabin, his mind was already mapping out the area, thinking about likely locations for other traps. The peaceful solitude he'd cultivated for so long felt suddenly hollow. He had looked into the eyes of something wild and magnificent today, something that should never have been trapped and tormented for human amusement. The sun was setting by the time he reached his cabin, painting the sky in sheets of orange and purple. Eli's shoulder burned with every movement as he cleaned and rebandaged the wounds. The claw marks were deep but clean. With proper care, they would heal without too much scarring. He sat on his porch as darkness settled over the forest, listening to the night sounds begin their chorus. Somewhere out there, a wounded leopard was hiding, trying to heal. And somewhere else, people were planning to trap and kill more animals like it, all for the sake of profit and twisted entertainment. Eli had spent years avoiding involvement in anything beyond his daily duties. It was easier that way, safer. But today had changed something in him. That leopard's defiant spirit had awakened something he'd thought long buried, a sense of justice, a willingness to stand against what was wrong. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do yet, but he knew he couldn't simply go back to maintaining trails and checking erosion barriers while pretending he hadn't seen what he'd seen. The peaceful routine of his life had been shattered, but maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. As night fully claimed the forest, Eli made himself a simple dinner and tended to his injuries again. His shoulder would be stiff tomorrow, but he'd had worse. What mattered was that he'd helped that leopard escape a cruel fate. It was a small victory, but it felt like the beginning of something larger. Tomorrow, he would begin paying closer attention to signs of unusual activity in his territory. He would listen more carefully to local gossip, watch for patterns that might lead him to whoever was behind this operation. It wouldn't be easy, and it definitely wouldn't be safe. But when he remembered those golden eyes staring into his, he knew he had no choice. The leopard's cry had broken the silence of his carefully ordered world. Now he had to decide what to do with that broken silence, how to rebuild it into something that included justice as well as peace. It wasn't the path he would have chosen for himself, but sometimes the most important paths are the ones we stumble onto by accident. Eli cleaned his dinner dishes and prepared for bed, moving carefully to avoid aggravating his wounds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions to make. But for now, he let himself rest, knowing he had done one good thing today. He had freed a magnificent creature from torture and possibly death. Whatever came next, that moment of connection with the leopard had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. The drive home was a blur for Eli. His shoulder throbbed with each bump in the dirt road, and his mind kept replaying the encounter with the leopard. Those golden eyes haunted him, their intelligence, their intensity, their pain. He'd seen plenty of wounded animals in his years working the forest, but something about this one was different. Back in his cabin, Eli cleaned and bandaged the claw marks as best he could. The wounds weren't as deep as he'd first feared, but they still stung fiercely. He stood at his kitchen sink, watching the Montana sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, and tried to make sense of what had happened. A leopard. In Montana. The more he thought about it, the more wrong it felt. Someone had brought that animal here, and the cruel trap suggested darker purposes than simple illegal exotic pets. But what could he do about it? Who would even believe him? That night, sleep proved elusive. Every sound from the forest seemed amplified. The rustle of leaves, the crack of branches, the soft pad of feet on his porch. Eli sat bolt upright in bed. Those weren't imagined sounds. Something was out there, moving carefully to avoid the creaky floorboards. He made his way to the window. The full moon cast enough light to see clearly, and what he saw made his breath catch in his throat. The leopard stood on his porch, its injured leg held slightly off the ground, its coat silvered by moonlight. It was looking directly at his window, as if it knew he was there. Eli stayed perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. The big cat's presence should have terrified him, but instead, he felt an odd sense of connection. After several long moments, the leopard turned and melted back into the shadows of the forest. The next morning, Eli found tracks in the soft earth around his cabin, proof he hadn't imagined the nighttime visitor. The leopard had circled his home several times before leaving. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching over him, rather than stalking him. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. During his rounds in the forest, Eli would catch glimpses of tawny fur between the trees, or hear the soft crunch of leaves that didn't match his own footsteps. The leopard was following him, keeping its distance but remaining close enough to be seen. Each night, it would appear near his cabin, sometimes on the porch, sometimes at the edge of the clearing. Never threatening, just present. After a week of this strange companionship, Eli decided he needed to report it. Whatever was going on, it wasn't right, and someone needed to investigate. He drove into town and headed straight for the ranger station. A leopard? Ranger Mike Thompson's laugh filled the small office. Come on, Eli. You've been out in the sun too long. I'm serious, Mike. Eli leaned forward in his chair. I've got the claw marks to prove it. He pulled down the collar of his shirt to show the healing wounds. Mike's smile faded slightly as he examined the marks, but the skepticism remained in his eyes. Could have been a mountain lion. They get pretty big sometimes. I know the difference between a mountain lion and a leopard, Eli insisted. This was definitely a leopard. African or Asian, I'm not sure, but definitely not native. Look, Mike sighed, leaning back in his chair. Even if there was a leopard, which there isn't, what do you expect us to do about it? We don't exactly have protocols for handling exotic cats. Eli left the station feeling frustrated and foolish. He should have known they wouldn't believe him. As he walked down the town's main street, a sign caught his eye. Morton Veterinary Clinic. Maybe a different approach was needed. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. The waiting room was empty, except for a woman in her early 30s, wearing scrubs and examining a chart. She looked up as he entered, her sharp eyes taking in his appearance with professional interest. Can I help you? Are you Dr. Morton? Claire. Morton. Yes. She set down her chart. What brings you in today? Eli hesitated, then decided to just lay it out straight. I found a leopard caught in a trap last week. Managed to free it, but it was pretty badly hurt. Since then, it's been following me around my property. He waited for the dismissive laugh, but it didn't come. Instead, Claire's expression grew serious. A leopard? You're certain? Absolutely certain. Show me where it got you, she said, gesturing. to his shoulder. She'd noticed his careful way of moving, protecting the injured side. Eli revealed the claw marks again. Claire examined them with professional thoroughness, her frown deepening. These are consistent with a large cat and the spacing. She looked up at him. I believe you, and I'm worried. That trap, was it a standard leg hold type? Yeah, but bigger than any I've seen before. Custom made, maybe. Claire nodded grimly. I've been hearing rumors. Rich clients, exotic animals, private hunting compounds. Nothing I could prove, but she paused, choosing her words carefully. If someone's importing large predators illegally, that's bad enough. But if they're deliberately trapping and injuring them first, why would anyone do that? To make them easier targets. Wounded animals can't run as fast or fight as well. Perfect for wealthy hunters who want a guaranteed trophy without any real risk. The disgust in her voice matched what Eli felt in his gut. She pulled out a notepad and began writing. I want you to call me if you see that leopard again. Here's my cell number. That leg needs treatment or infection could set in. And Eli, she met his eyes steadily. Be careful. People who would do this to animals wouldn't hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in their way. Eli drove home with Claire's warning echoing in his mind. The sun was setting as he pulled up to his cabin, casting long shadows through the trees. Movement caught his eye. The leopard, standing at the forest's edge. It watched him with those knowing golden eyes, and Eli felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. This magnificent creature had chosen to trust him, and he couldn't let it down. The big cat limped forward a few steps, then stopped, as if inviting him to understand something. Its leg was clearly still causing it pain, but there was a determination in its bearing that spoke of an unbroken spirit. Eli thought about what Claire had said about the traps, about wounded animals being easier targets. Someone had tried to break this leopard's spirit, to turn it into a living trophy. Instead, they'd created an ally he never expected to have done. As darkness fell, the leopard melted back into the forest, but Eli knew it wouldn't go far. Whatever was going on in these woods, whatever cruel game was being played was magnificent. Creatures like this one, he was now part of it. And with Claire's help, maybe they could do something to stop it. He walked to his porch and stood there for a long moment, listening to the evening sounds of the forest. Somewhere out there, a leopard that should never have been in Montana was watching over him, trusting him to make things right. It was a trust he intended to honor, no matter where it led. The morning dawned crisp and clear as Claire's truck wound its way up the dirt road to Eli's cabin. He'd been surprised when she called at 6 in the morning, insisting on examining the tracks herself. Now, watching her purposeful stride as she stepped out of her vehicle, he could see the determination that drove her. Good morning, she called out, carrying a heavy backpack. Hope you don't mind the early visit, but tracking is always better with fresh light. Eli nodded, leading her toward the edge of his property where he'd last seen the leopard. It was. Here last night again. Seems to be getting bolder. Claire knelt beside a clear set of prints in the soft earth. She pulled out a measuring tape and a camera from her pack, methodically documenting everything. These are definitely from a leopard. Adult male, I'd say, based on the size. She traced the outline with her finger. See how the right front print is slightly irregular? That's from compensating for the injured leg. You seem to know a lot about big cats for a local vet, Eli observed. Claire stood up, brushing dirt from her knees. I did my residency at a wildlife sanctuary in South Africa. Spent 2 years working with rescued big cats before coming back home to Montana. Her expression darkened. Never thought those skills would be needed here. They followed the tracks into the woods, Claire photographing and measuring at regular intervals. The morning sun filtered through the pine needles, casting dappled shadows. That reminded Eli of a leopard's spots. The thought made him glance around nervously. "He's probably watching us right now," Claire said softly, noticing his unease. "These cats are incredibly stealthy, but I don't think he means us harm. You said he's been following you?" "Yeah, like some kind of guardian angel with claws," Eli chuckled without humor. "Strangest thing I've ever experienced." Claire stopped, walking, her face serious. "Eli, there's something you should know. These tracks, the trap you described, they fit a pattern I've been worried about for months." She hesitated. "Have you heard of Gregory Harlan, the rancher? Big spread about 20 miles east of here. That's him. He's got money, influence, friends in high places, but there have been rumors." Claire lowered her voice, though they were far from any other ears. "Some of my clients have reported strange sounds at night. Roars that shouldn't exist in Montana. Animals going missing. And always near Harlan's property." Eli felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "You think he's connected to the Leopard?" "I think he's running an illegal exotic animal operation. Private hunting compounds where wealthy clients can shoot captive animals for trophies." But proving it, she shook her head in frustration. "Every time I've tried to investigate, I hit walls. People won't talk. Evidence disappears." They reached a small clearing where the track showed the Leopard had rested. Claire knelt again, examining the ground. "There's blood here. The wound is still seeping. He needs medical attention, Eli. What can we do? It's not like we can just walk up and give him a shot." "No, but we can document everything, build a case." Claire stood, her eyes blazing with determination. "This Leopard is evidence. Living proof that something illegal is happening. But we need more." Eli ran a hand through his hair, conflicted. He'd spent years avoiding trouble, keeping to himself. But the memory of the Leopard's pain, its trusting eyes after he freed it from the trap, wouldn't let him walk away. "What are you suggesting?" "Help me investigate. You know these woods better than anyone. The Leopard trusts you. Together, maybe we can expose what's happening and shut it down before more animals suffer." As if in response to her words, a twig snapped in the forest behind them. They both turned to see the Leopard standing there, partially hidden by shadows. Its golden eyes seemed to pierce right through Eli, challenging him to make a choice. "It's incredible," Claire breathed, staying perfectly still. "Look at his bearing, even injured. Such dignity." The Leopard's presence felt like a weight on Eli's conscience. He couldn't ignore this anymore. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll help. But we need to be careful. If Harlan's behind this and he catches wind of what we're doing, I know." Claire's voice was equally soft. "But we can't let fear stop us from doing what's right." The Leopard watched them for another long moment before melting away into the forest. But Eli knew it wouldn't go far. Something had shifted this morning, forming an unlikely alliance between a solitary forestry worker, a determined veterinarian, and a wounded leopard that shouldn't exist in these mountains. They spent the next hour mapping the leopard's territory, Claire making detailed notes about its patterns and behavior. She showed Eli how to recognize signs he'd missed before. Scrape, marks on trees, tufts of fur, the remains of small prey. "The trap was probably set here," Claire said, pointing to a game trail. "See how the grass is still matted down? And these marks in the bark? He thrashed against this tree while trying to free himself." Eli felt sick remembering the leopard's agonized cries. "How long do you think he was trapped?" "Hours, at least. The fact that he survived at all shows incredible strength." Claire packed away her equipment. "We need to start gathering information about Harlan's operation. Carefully. He's got too much influence to confront directly without solid evidence." "I can keep an eye on the property lines," Eli offered. "My work takes me all around these parts. Nobody questions a forestry worker checking trails." Claire nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. I can ask around about unusual veterinary supply orders, any patterns in missing livestock. People talk to their vet. She shouldered her pack. We should meet regularly to compare notes. But not here. Harlan probably has people watching the roads. There's an old fire tower about 3 miles west, Eli suggested. It's abandoned now, but I keep it maintained. Good sight lines, multiple escape routes. Perfect. Let's meet there every other day at dawn. Claire started walking back toward her truck, then paused. Eli, thank you. I felt so alone trying to fight this. It means a lot to have someone else who understands. Eli watched her drive away, feeling both energized and uneasy about what they were undertaking. A soft growl from the trees reminded him that they had an unexpected ally in their mission. The leopard emerged partially from the shadows, its injured leg held carefully as it moved. Guess we're all in this together now, Eli murmured. The big cat's ears flicked forward at his voice, and for a moment, they regarded each other with a shared purpose. Then the leopard disappeared again, leaving Eli to wonder what he'd gotten himself into. But as he walked back to his cabin, he felt more alive than he had in years. The quiet life he'd built for himself had been disrupted, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Sometimes, he realized, doing the right thing meant stepping out of your comfort zone and facing the darkness head-on. The morning sun was fully up now, warming the spring air. Somewhere in these woods, a magnificent creature was counting on them to bring justice. And with Claire's expertise and determination combined with his knowledge of the land, they just might have a chance at succeeding. The trap was probably set here, Claire said, pointing to a game trail. See how the grass is still flattened in a circular pattern? She traced the outline with her finger, careful not to disturb the evidence. Eli nodded, feeling his stomach tighten at the memory of the leopard's agonized cries. Should we keep following the trail? It seems to lead east. Toward Harlan's property, Claire confirmed, standing up and brushing dirt from her knees. That can't be a coincidence. They moved carefully through the forest, following both fresh and old tracks. The leopard's path showed a clear pattern, circling around a specific area about 5 miles from where Eli had first found it. As they got closer to Harlan's land, Claire motioned for them to move more quietly. The morning air grew thicker, and strange sounds began to drift through the trees. At first, Eli thought he was imagining things, a roar that sounded more like an African savanna than Montana wilderness, followed by metallic clanking. Did you hear that? He whispered to Claire. She nodded, her face grim. That was definitely a lion. We need to get closer, but carefully. They crept forward, staying low and using the dense undergrowth for cover. The forest suddenly gave way to a clearing, hidden from the main road by a thick stand of trees. Eli's breath caught in his throat at what he saw. A high fence, carefully, concealed with camouflage netting, enclosed several acres. Inside, they could make out the shapes of large metal cages arranged in rows. The compound looked professional, with security cameras mounted on poles and a small guardhouse near the entrance. Claire pulled out her phone and started taking pictures, her hands shaking slightly. This is worse than I imagined, she whispered. Look at the size of those cages. They're meant for big cats. Eli spotted movement near one of the cages. 2 men in uniform carrying buckets, probably feeding the animals. They wore holstered pistols on their hips, making it clear this wasn't just a simple ranch operation. Another roar echoed across the compound, followed by a different sound that made Eli's blood run cold. The distinctive cough-like call of a leopard. That could be our friend, he murmured. They carefully circled the perimeter, documenting everything they could see. Claire's veterinary expertise helped identify the purposes of different structures, quarantine areas, feeding stations, and what looked disturbingly like a staging area for some kind of events. Those platforms. Claire pointed to elevated wooden structures near some of the larger enclosures. They're hunting blinds. Harlan isn't just keeping these animals. He's selling hunting experiences. Rich clients paying to shoot captive, exotic animals. The disgust in her voice matched the churning in Eli's stomach. He'd heard of such operations in other countries, but never imagined one operating here in Montana. He raised his phone to take another picture when a twig snapped behind them. They froze. Heavy footsteps approached through the forest. Claire grabbed Eli's arm, pulling him down behind a fallen log just as two armed guards passed by, less than 20 feet away. "Boss wants." "The new shipment moved tonight," one guard was saying. "That cat that got loose really spooked him." "Yeah, well, if anyone else spots it, we'll have bigger problems then." Their voices faded as they moved away, but the message was clear. They needed to leave. Now, Eli and Claire began backing away slowly, staying low and watching their step. They'd made it about 50 yards when a sharp voice cut through the air. "Hey, over there. Run!" Eli hissed, grabbing Claire's hand. They burst into motion just as shouts erupted behind them. They crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at their faces. Allied them down a steep ravine, knowing the guards would have trouble following quickly if they weren't familiar with the terrain. Claire kept pace beside him, her breath coming in controlled gasps. The sound of pursuit grew fainter, but they didn't slow down until they'd put at least a mile between themselves and the compound. Finally, they stopped in a small hollow, both breathing hard. "Did you get the pictures?" Eli managed between breaths. Claire nodded, pulling out her phone to check. "Everything. The cages, the hunting blinds, even the armed guards. This is exactly what we needed." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with a mixture of triumph and fear. "But Eli, we're in serious trouble now. Harlan's not going to let this go if he finds out we were there." "Then we need to act fast," Eli said, still scanning the forest around them. "What's our next move?" "I have some contacts in wildlife law." "Enforcement," Claire said. "People I trust. But we need to be smart about this. Harlan has influence, money. We need to make sure the evidence gets." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the trees as Eli and Claire made their way back from Harlan's compound. Their discovery weighed heavily on them both. Every snapping twig and rustling leaf made them jump. The reality of what they'd uncovered, making them hyper-aware of their surroundings. "We need to get these photos to the authorities," Claire whispered, clutching her phone close. "But we have to be smart about this. Harlan has connections everywhere." Eli nodded, his jaw tight. "Let's get back to my cabin first. We can figure out our next move there." As they approached the clearing where Eli's cabin stood, something felt wrong. The air carried an unfamiliar scent, acrid and chemical. His instincts screamed danger just as Claire grabbed his arm. "Smoke," she hissed, pointing to thin wisps rising from behind the cabin. Before Eli could respond, an orange glow erupted from his front porch. The crackling sound of flames filled the air, and dark figures moved in the lengthening shadows. 3 men in dark clothing were spreading something around the cabin's base. Gasoline, judging by the sharp smell now burning their nostrils. "Inside! Get them inside!" a gruff voice commanded. It was followed by the sound of breaking glass as something crashed through Eli's window. Claire's fingers dug into Eli's arm. "They think we're in there," she whispered, her voice trembling but controlled. "They're trying to trap us." The flames spread with frightening speed, engulfing the front of the cabin. The heat reached them even from their hidden position in the trees. Eli's hole. The flames consumed Eli's cabin with terrifying speed. But that wasn't the worst discovery of the day. While they watched helplessly from the tree line, Claire pulled out her phone, her hand shaking as she opened files she'd photographed at Harlan's compound. "Eli, look at this," she whispered, her voice tight with horror. "These aren't just shipping manifests. They're client lists. Wealthy people paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for." Her voice cracked. Eli leaned closer, squinting at the screen in the orange glow of his burning home. The documents showed detailed arrangements, dates, prices, and specifications for hunting experiences. Each entry listed an exotic animal, its measurements, and specific instructions for preparation. "They're staging hunts," Claire continued, her face pale. "The leopard we found, it wasn't an escape. They deliberately trapped it, wounded it, to make it easier for some rich person to track and kill." She scrolled through more photos, revealing row after row of similar arrangements. "There are dozens more animals listed here. Tigers, lions, even endangered species. All brought in illegally, all meant to die for someone's trophy wall." The truth hit Eli like a physical blow. The leopard's wounded state, its unusual behavior, it all made terrible sense now. It wasn't just running from captivity. It had escaped. Its own execution. Through the smoke and flames, a familiar shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. The leopard emerged, its golden eyes reflecting the fire. It stood watching them, muscles tensed, as one of Harlan's men rounded the corner of the burning cabin. The man raised his rifle, but the leopard was faster. With a snarl that echoed through the trees, it launched itself at the attacker. The rifle went flying as man and beast tumbled across the ground. The other men shouted in alarm, but the leopard had already melted back into the shadows, leaving their companion scrambling to his feet and running for safety. "We have to stop this," Eli said, his quiet voice carrying steel. "Not just for our leopard, but for all of them. No animal deserves to be tortured for someone's sick game." Claire nodded, her professional demeanor cracking to show raw determination. "The documents prove everything. Shipping records, client payments, even scheduled dates for upcoming hunts. But Harlan's men will be looking for us now. We need to move fast." The leopard reappeared at the edge of the woods, as if understanding their conversation. Its scarred face turned toward them, those intelligent eyes holding Eli's gaze for a long moment before it disappeared into the gathering darkness. "It saved us," Claire whispered, staring at where the leopard had been. "After everything humans have done to it, it still chose to protect us." "Because it knows we're trying to help," Eli replied, watching his home burn while formulating a plan. "And we're not going to let it down." The night wrapped around Eli and Claire like a cold blanket as they crouched behind thick bushes near Harlan's compound. Their breath came out in visible puffs in the chilly Montana air. A familiar shadow, the leopard, moved silently through. The trees behind them, its presence now a strange comfort rather than a threat. "Security's lighter than I expected," Claire whispered, peering through her binoculars at the compound. Only 2 guards patrolled the perimeter, their flashlight beams cutting lazy arcs through the darkness. "That's what worries me," Eli muttered, checking his camera. "Harlan's not usually this careless." They waited until the guards completed their round, then moved swiftly across the open ground. Claire's lockpicking skills, learned during her veterinary work with rescue operations, made quick work of the side door's padlock. The hinges creaked softly as they slipped inside. The stench hit them first, a nauseating mix of decay and animal waste that made their eyes water. As their vision adjusted to the darkness, horror spread across their faces. Cages lined both walls of the long building, many containing shapes that neither of them wanted to look at too closely. "Oh God," Claire choked out, her hand covering her mouth. She approached one of the cages, where a thin tiger lay motionless, its ribs showing through its dull coat. "This one's barely alive." Eli started taking pictures, his camera clicking rapidly. In the darkness, each flash illuminated new horrors, Empty food bowls, filthy water, and worse. In one cage, a lion cub lay dead, its small body already stiff. "We need to document everything," Claire said, her voice tight with controlled anger. She pulled out her phone and started recording video, narrating quietly. Multiple violations of animal welfare laws, evidence of severe neglect, suspected. Deaths due to starvation. A noise outside made them freeze. Footsteps crunched on gravel, coming closer. "Quick," Eli hissed, pulling Claire behind a stack of empty crates. The door creaked open, and a flashlight beam swept across the cages. They held their breath as heavy boots thudded past their hiding spot. The guard paused, sniffing the air. "Something ain't right," he muttered into his radio. "Better check the whole building." Claire's hand found Eli's in the darkness, squeezing. Tight. They couldn't be caught here. Not with all this evidence on their devices. The guard's footsteps moved away, deeper into the building. That's when they heard it. A low growl from outside. The Leopard had created a diversion, drawing the guard's attention. "Now's our chance," Eli whispered. They slipped out the way they came, hearts pounding as they ran for the trees. Behind them, shouts of confusion erupted from the compound as guards investigated the Leopard's presence. Only when they were safely hidden in the forest did they stop to catch their breath. Claire quickly backed up their evidence to a secure cloud server. "We did it," she said, triumphant. "With these photos and videos, there's no way Harlan can." The sound of approaching vehicles cut her off. Through the trees, they saw a line of black SUVs heading toward Harlan's compound. "He knew," Eli realized with growing dread. "He let us in. He wanted us to see this." They worked methodically through the compound, documenting the horrific conditions. The Leopard's presence outside seemed to keep watch, its occasional soft growls a warning system. After gathering enough evidence, they carefully made their way back outside, hearts pounding with a mixture of relief and rage at what they'd witnessed. But their success was short-lived. The next morning, Eli woke to an unnaturally quiet forest. Even the birds seemed hushed. His phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Missing something, Whitaker?" Harlan's voice dripped with malice. "Or should I say someone?" Eli's blood ran cold. "Where is she?" "Dr. Morton should have minded her own business. Just like you should have. Consider this a final warning. Back off, or she won't be coming back at all." The line went dead. Eli's hand shook as he dialed Claire's number. No answer. He jumped in his truck and sped to her clinic. The front door stood open, papers scattered. Across the floor, signs of struggle marked the walls, a knocked-over lamp, a broken picture frame. Claire's phone lay shattered near her desk dot outside the clinic, tire tracks cut deep into the gravel. Eli fell to his knees, overwhelmed by guilt and fear. He'd gotten her into this. Now she was paying the price for his decision to get involved. Back at his cabin, Eli paced restlessly. The Leopard appeared at the tree line, its golden eyes tracking his movements. Throughout the day, it circled his property like a protective spirit, refusing to leave despite his distress. As night fell, the big cat's presence became more pronounced. Pacing, watching, almost urging him to action. Eli sat on his porch steps, head in his hands. The weight of Claire's capture crushed him. He tried so hard to avoid conflict, to live quietly, to not make waves. But where had that gotten him? A good woman was in danger because he'd waited too long to take a stand. The Leopard approached closer than it ever had before, its scarred face catching the porch light. Those intelligent eyes seemed to hold a challenge. This magnificent creature hadn't given up when trapped and wounded. It had fought, survived, and found allies. Now it stood guard over him, showing more courage than he was showing himself. "You're right," Eli whispered to the cat. "No more running. No more hiding." he stood up, a new resolve hardening his features. Claire had stood up for what was right without hesitation. She'd fought for animals who couldn't fight for themselves. Now it was his turn to fight for her. The leopard rumbled deep in its chest, as if approving his decision. Eli went inside and began gathering what he'd need. He couldn't back down now. Not with Claire's life at stake. The time for caution was over. The only way forward was through Harlan and his entire operation. Eli knew he couldn't storm Harlan's compound alone. He reached out to Marcus Halle, a retired investigator he'd heard about through Claire's research. Marcus lived in a small house on the outskirts of town, and when Eli knocked on his door, the grizzled man answered with suspicious eyes. "I know about Harlan," Eli said without preamble, "and I need your help." Marcus's weathered face tightened. "Harlan? That's a dangerous name to throw around. He has Claire Morton and evidence of his illegal hunting operation." That got Marcus's attention. He invited Eli inside, and over coffee, Eli learned how Marcus had spent years trying to bring Harlan down, only to be forced into early retirement when corruption protected the wealthy rancher. "I've waited a long time to see that man fall," Marcus said, checking his old service weapon. "Count me in." They planned their attack carefully. Under cover of darkness, they approached the compound from different directions. Marcus created a diversion at the main gate, drawing most of Harlan's guards away. Eli slipped in through the back, where the cages were kept. He found Claire locked in a storage room, bruised but alive. "I knew you'd come," she whispered as he helped her up. Their reunion was cut short by shouts and gunfire. Marcus was holding his own against 3 of Harlan's men, but more were coming. Eli and Claire ran toward the animal enclosures, planning to release them as both a distraction and an act of justice. Suddenly, Harlan himself appeared, rifle raised. "That's far enough, Whitaker." His finger tightened on the trigger. Time seemed to slow. Eli saw death in Harlan's eyes. But then a golden blur launched from the shadows, the leopard, fully healed and radiating power. It slammed into Harlan with unstoppable force, sending the rifle flying. The big cat's roar echoed through the compound, triggering a chorus of answering cries from the caged animals. Taking advantage of the chaos, Eli tackled Harlan while Claire and Marcus began opening cages. Animals streamed out into the night. Tigers, lions, exotic birds. Years of captivity ended in moments of freedom. The leopard stood watch over the subdued Harlan, its scarred face a testament to survival and triumph. Its golden eyes met Eli's, and in that moment, he understood that this magnificent creature had been more than just a catalyst. It had been a teacher, showing him the power of standing up against cruelty. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Marcus had called in backup from officers he still trusted. Harlan's empire was crumbling, his secrets exposed to the light of justice. The leopard melted into the shadows as flashlights began sweeping the compound. Its work was done. Like the other freed animals, it would find its own path now, carrying the memory of an unlikely alliance between human compassion and wild courage. The flashing lights of police cars illuminated the compound like a carnival gone wrong. Eli watched as officers swarmed the property, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Harlan sat in the back of a patrol car, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. The mighty rancher looked small now, stripped of his power and pretense. Claire stood beside Eli, her hand finding his in the chaos. Despite her bruises, her eyes sparkled with triumph. "I can't believe we actually did it," she whispered. Marcus Halle moved through the scene like a conductor, directing trusted officers to secure evidence and document everything. His years of frustrated investigation were finally bearing fruit. "We're finding records going back 5 years, he called out to Eli. "International bank transfers, client lists for illegal hunts, everything." State wildlife officials arrived in a convoy of trucks, bringing veterinarians and animal transport equipment. The scope of Harlan's operation became clearer with each passing hour. Behind the main compound, they discovered a second set of buildings, filled with exotic animal pelts and mounted trophies, grin testimony to years of staged hunts. 57 living animals, Claire reported after helping with the initial assessment. Tigers, lions, leopards, rare birds, some of them endangered species. Most are malnourished, but they'll survive with proper care. Her voice caught. We've also found remains, evidence of the ones who didn't make it. Eli pulled her close, feeling her tremble. They can't hurt anyone else now. As dawn approached, news vans began arriving. Reporters gathered at the compound's gates, their cameras capturing the procession of animal transport vehicles. Harlan's name, once synonymous with wealth and influence, would now be forever linked to cruelty and corruption. We've contacted sanctuaries across the country, a wildlife official told them. These animals will get the care they need. No more cages, no more fear. Claire worked tirelessly with the veterinary team, treating injuries and preparing animals for transport. Eli helped where he could, his heart heavy yet hopeful as he watched each creature being carefully moved to freedom. Some of the big cats were so weak they had to be carried on stretchers, while others showed surprising spirit despite their ordeal. Near noon, Marcus approached them with coffee and news. Harlan singing like a bird to save his own skin. He's naming names, corrupt officials, international traffickers, clients who paid for illegal hunts. This is going to shake things up all the way to the state capital. Eli nodded, thinking of the ripple effects one moment of compassion had created. That day in the forest, when he'd chosen to help an injured leopard, he could never have imagined where it would lead. As the day wore on, the compound slowly emptied. Each animal departure felt like a small victory, a piece of justice being restored. Claire coordinated with sanctuary staff, ensuring each creature would receive appropriate care and rehabilitation. Some of them might never fully recover, she admitted to Eli as they watched a tiger being loaded for transport. But they'll have peace now, space to heal. In the late afternoon, movement caught Eli's eye. At the edge of the forest, the leopard appeared. It stood proud and alert, its scarred face unmistakable. Claire squeezed his hand as they watched their unlikely ally survey the scene. You know, she said softly, that leopard chose well when it trusted you. The big cat's golden eyes found them. In that gaze, Eli saw something that transcended the usual barrier between human and wild animal, a recognition, perhaps even a farewell. The leopard had been both victim and hero, catalyst and savior. Go on, Eli whispered. You're free now. As if understanding, the leopard turned and melted into the forest shadows. This time, Eli knew it wouldn't return. Its purpose was fulfilled, its path now leading back to the wild where it belonged. Claire leaned against him, both of them exhausted but content. What happens now? She asked. Eli looked at the dismantled compound, the empty cages, the evidence of darkness being brought to light. He thought of his burned cabin, of Claire's bruises, of all they'd risked and gained. Now we rebuild, he said, and we make sure this never happens again. They stood together as the sun set, watching the last animal transport pull away. The compound that had housed so much suffering would soon be demolished, its dark purpose erased. But the memory of what happened here, the courage, the compassion, the triumph of justice over greed, would remain. In the distance, a leopard's roar echoed through the trees, free and untamed. It was a sound of victory, of hope restored, of wounds healed and wrongs made right. Eli and Claire smiled, knowing their lives would never be the same, and grateful for the wild spirit that had shown them the power of standing up for what was. Right. If you believe stories can heal, lift, and connect us, this channel is for you. Thanks for being here. Hit subscribe, and I'll meet you again tomorrow with something real.